Hello everyone and welcome back to the Peggy Smedley Show. I'm your host Peggy Smedley. My next guest is joining me once again to continue our discussion around the future of work. We focused on technology and helping the younger generation develop soft skills and really what is the workforce of tomorrow. Today we're going to kind of get a more granular talk, I think, when we talk about the workforce of tomorrow and reskill, upskill, and so much more. Please welcome back Pamela Evette, Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina. Lieutenant Governor, welcome back to the show.
Well, Peggy, thank you so much for having me.
I've loved the conversations that we have. I think it's really important for us to talk about the future generation and what they're going to need to really think about what the future of work is all about. So I thought today if we could kind of change our attention a little bit, or maybe turn our attention to the next generation of workforce, and maybe specifically what is going to be involved in that training that we're going to give them? What do we really need to be doing and thinking about?
So, it was funny, I've had people in today from Junior Achievement and DO, and, we've been talking about what do our next generation of employees look like, and what businesses are calling for is soft skills. Understanding just everything that revolves on work, how you deal with coworkers, how do you deal with clients, and sometimes clients that aren't always happy, right? Because something has gone wrong in the process. And, how do you deal with coworkers and showing up for work on time? Number one thing that employers are really having a problem with is people just showing up for work on time. And so I think we need to go back and we need to make sure that, as we talked about in the last segment, we get our kids working again, because I think that's where you learn a lot of those soft skill-like techniques. So I think that's the very basics of what we need to do to help this next generation. I think another big thing with this next generation of employees that are coming up is to make sure that they are well-rounded with the tech skills they're going to need. The really manual labor of things is starting to go away. We see with a population that's decreasing that we need automation to take over a lot of jobs, and a lot of those jobs that probably were dangerous to employees, not from a life or death danger, but a chronic getting injured at work, right? So, BMW, when I was at BMW and I was looking at their entire process, when it came to the undercoating of cars, a lot of that is robotics driven now, because they're spraying underbody and it's slippery and it's slick and people would slip and fall. And so where I see businesses trying to use technology in is those areas. But with technology becomes brain power that has to work that technology, right? We have to be able to reprogram and repurpose. And so we want to make sure we put that into play, that kids understand that they really have to become tech savvy. And most of our kids, that was probably a much bigger deal for you and I, where our kids, they're kind of falling into that tech savvy role at a very young age.
It's almost the point you make there, the slips, trips, and falls. We almost forget we have to really reinforce that. If we think we want to use just technology, but when we get into just truly manufacturing plants or in construction, those are the major accidents that happen. And the last thing we don't want is our employees to go not make it home at night safe.
Exactly.
So how do we get that idea of the type of progress? Are we making the right progress right now? Or do we still have a lot to do to get the next generation to understand it's not just about technology, there's so many other things along the way, plus the technology?
I think that's important. And I think we have to get back a sense of pride in output. My dad used to say things to us like, I don't care if you want to be a ditch digger, just be the best ditch digger that there is out there, right? And taking personal pride for the work you do, I think, is something that we may have slipped off a little bit on here, is just how do we get people to just say, hey, this is my role. I'm so proud of my role. I want everything to go out of here 100%. And I think with that, as we talk about with manufacturers and really all employers, is you have to get people trained on safety around the workplace. Employees need to feel like they're more in partnership with our businesses, right? Because I think sometimes we find that when employees don't realize that businesses can only pay them more, give them better benefits when their profits go up, right? So a lot of that wraps around hard costs, whether it be unemployment, whether it be workers' compensation, whether it be health benefits. And so when they don't take care in the workplace and they're not working cautiously and making sure they're doing anything, and workers' comp rates go up, that's just more that the company has to spend out in hardcore costs. That's less they can give to you. That's less they can give you in incentives and benefits. And somehow along the way, that seems to be lost, where we feel like, well, when accidents happen at work, that's taken care of by an insurance company. It doesn't really affect my employer. It really does affect your employer because it goes right to the bottom line.
Do we have to also understand it's not just the CEO lives in the ivory tower and that workers are just on the bottom rung? That it's a collaboration, it's process, technology, people. Everybody has to come together. It's government. Yeah. We all have to work together. Do we have to reinforce that? Because we've always separated it and everybody's in these silos. Do we have to make them all feel like you're part of the solution, not the problem as workers?
I think that's at 100%, right? I think what we're seeing in so many areas of our country and our world is really trying to put people in their corners, right? So if you're a worker, you go in that corner. And if you're middle management, you go in this corner. If you're in the C-suite, you go over there in that corner. Well, what does that make it look like? It makes it look like everybody that's not in your corner is your enemy. And so then you stop trying to work with and collaborate with, and it becomes them against us. And that's not what we want to have happen, right? Everybody has their heartburn, no matter what their job is in any organization, right? So this, if you don't build a quality product, you'll lose your job. If the CEO can continue to turn product and come up with innovation and get new customers and make sure that the company is profitable, he will be gone. So like everybody has their hand in this. And, we talked a little bit about my business the last time, and I used to say that to people. Whether it was my husband out there selling business, me making sure the taxes were paid, or if you went out to our distribution room and it was the person putting a label on a FedEx package. If that FedEx package doesn't get there, and it may seem like the most insignificant part of our process, right? But if there's a wrong label or a wrong address on a package that doesn't get to the client, then it doesn't matter what all of us did. And it doesn't matter how unflawed the process was. We look terrible. So we all sink or swim together. And that's what we have to get back to as a nation in general. You hear people say it all the time. You might not like the pilot of your plane, but you're not going to go in there and wish him bad. Because if that plane goes down, we're all going down with it, right? And I think we don't look at that with business anymore. It's a them against us mentality. But without them, there's no us. Without us, there's no them. And we need to get back into that spirit of camaraderie where a high tide will rise all ships and we all sink or swim together.
It's an interesting point you make because there's also like reviews. We've used social media to be good and bad.
Yep.
And in fact, when there's reviews, most of us look at the first few reviews. And if we don't pay attention, those reviews can sink our company. So it's those first few reviews that make a really big difference on the success or failure of a company. So you just described, if that package didn't make there for our company, that can make a big difference. That one review can totally sink a small company, a medium-sized company. A large company maybe can rebound, but there's a lot that has to be done. So is it about, again, constantly educating our employees? Because we might say an employee leaves, writes a bad review. A customer writes a bad review. So it's constantly reinforcing, educating our employees all the time. We think we did in education, but do we constantly have to train them, help them understand we're all in this together for a successful, positive growth of the company?
Yes, and I think sometimes because we've gotten in such a social media world, right, where we feel like we've heard that phrase keyboard warrior, where you get out there and you do something. I always tell people to be kind, even in my new role, when I say reach out to your elected officials, but be kind, right? Because we're all people. We all have a bad day. We can all make a mistake. It's nothing that's personal. And I wish everybody listening to this thinks about that. Like, take a breath. Just take a breath and then see if you're still that mad in the morning. See if it's something that really hurts you that much. Because you're right. A bad day, a bad incident could really harm somebody's company and their future. And is it really worth it? So I just wish we would bring grace as my word of the year. I think I might have said that last time we talked. We all have to have a little bit more grace and realize that we're all in this crazy thing called life together, and none of us are perfect. So give everybody a little kindness and compassion. I think it would go a long way.
Stephen Covey has a great book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and he tells the story in the book about being on the train and actually watching 2 kids run around. And the father is not controlling them. And he's like, why are they not stopping these children? And finally he turns to the father and he says, why are you, because people are getting very angry. And he's like, why are you not stopping them? And he says, well, and he's wondering, he said, they just lost their mother. Changes your attitude right away when you think 1 minute they're not controlling their children, but you just said you need to have grace. It's wonderful.
I've said that to my kids for as long as I can remember, is you don't know what's making somebody have a bad day. Their child could be sick. They could have lost their spouse. They could be, faced with financial difficulties that mean that this is the last house payment they could make. It's really usually not about you when somebody's in a bad mood or maybe is snippy. So yes, let's all go back to having a little grace and realizing that we all have bad days together.
So that empathy that you talk about, that grace, do we need as mentors? We talked a little bit about this last time, the empathy. So let's talk about encouraging STEM too now today, because I think STEM and STEAM, we talked a little bit about this, the need for those degrees. We have to have those degrees.
We do.
But not everybody wants to go to college, but we also need to talk about encouraging the generation that wants to go to a trade school. So there's, I always say the yin and the yang. There's a balance we have to have because we need those mechanical and electrical engineers that are going to be there. And we also need those plumbers and all of those other types of trades that are out there. How do we find the right balance to tell that generation it's okay to do what you want and not to feel pigeonholed, but to find the mentors to help you find that path that we talked about as well?
I think a lot of that comes from the parents, right? Like we have been told for a long time, and I'll tell you, the granddaughter of Polish immigrants, you get it. Their level of success, their reason for leaving their country is so you could have a better life, right? And so that has always been tied into that 4-year college degree. But that's not the way it is anymore. And when I talk to kids, when you're out at high schools, really the barrier for going into a technical trade or into one of the trades, whether it be plumbing or HVAC or electrical, is because nobody is encouraging them. And so we want to make sure that parents realize, for one, these are great paying jobs, right? And then 2, wanting to go into manufacturing, wanting to build somebody. Our manufacturing environments are not dirty, dark, and dangerous anymore. When my grandfather came here and started working in the steel mills, that was the case, right? People were losing their lives. It was a whole different time. Well, now you walk into any of our manufacturing plants and you might as well walk into it with a briefcase and a computer because, that's what you're working on. It's not, they're air conditioned, they're clean, they're safe. It's not like and so I think a lot of it is re-education to the parents and the grandparents and to the guidance counselors at a lot of schools.
Do we have to help not only just explain that it's not dirty, dark, and dangerous, and we talked about that, but the need, when we start talking about the types of positions, we can say we want to have EVs, but we need to have the technicians who are going to repair those EVs.
Oh, yeah.
We can talk about the types of bus drivers, but we have to train bus drivers differently. We might say it's a different type of world, but there's a lot of new positions that are going to be created. Is it about the re-education of changing people's mindsets as we move to this new technology that's occurring? There's also these new positions that are being emerged that I think most parents don't even understand what we need. As technology advances, there's a whole host of new positions that are emerging.
That's true, and I think that's why it's so important. I had the director of DO in here earlier today, and really our workforce of tomorrow is sitting in middle school right now. And it's making sure that we set them up for what is important, like where are the positions that that we know we're reaching a shortfall in. Years ago I read an article that talked about Apple and how, we all have Apple phones, and there was a big push to try to get those phones manufactured here. But we didn't have the people and the skill set that could manufacture them here, right? We needed mechanical engineers or electrical engineers. We needed these types of, and we weren't turning them out. So I think it's one, how do I identify kids at a much younger age that are hardwired for that kind of, like my brother is an engineer, like he's been hardwired that way forever. How do we now look at our educational system a little bit more like Europe does, where they kind of do assessments to see what you're good at? Because I think a lot of times you think what you would like to be, and then what am I really good at? If you don't like sitting behind a desk, an accountant is probably not what you should be, right? Even if you like numbers, find something else where you like numbers that gets you out in the world moving around. And I think we would be better off to help our kids make those paths instead of giving them this open board of you can be whatever you want to be, but eventually what you want to be and what you should be may not be the same thing. And that's where our kids need guidance. I think our kids don't even realize all the cool things that are out there that they can do, right? Because they're not exposed to them. So I think doing a great job, junior achievement. I was shocked to learn a few years ago that junior achievement is still alive and well and in our schools, and helping give kids an idea of these incredible positions that are out there that they don't even know exist, but may fit in. So mentoring, as you just said earlier, becomes a big thing. Junior achievement, really having a hard time finding mentors and people to go into schools to talk about what they do. We live in this environment now where a lot of people work from home, and so they're not volunteering to do these things as much. Well, that's really sad to me, because if we don't have them out there inspiring the next generation to do that, if we don't have our engineers out there telling them how cool it is to build a bridge and a house and a boat and whatever they're building, we're not going to inspire the next generation, that young child who go, wow, that's really cool. I bet I can take these Legos that I'm doing, I could build a whole bridge for real with concrete and steel. So I think we have to we have to change our mindset yet again of how are we reaching out. Maybe it's really engaging our C-suite people again and saying, if you are scared of your workforce of tomorrow, then we need you now to re-engage. We need you to get involved. We need you to volunteer. That's what we're going to try to do here in South Carolina.
And I think that's an important thing, because if you look at not only the younger generation, or as we talked about the millennials, let's think about women. We had COVID, and I think a problem that happened is women had to go home and they had to stay home. They haven't gone back to the workforce. We know we've seen an increase in the salaries a little bit. We're at like 82 cents on the dollar, but we're not seeing them go back to work. And maybe that's in some ways a good thing or a bad thing. But the question right now is, we don't want to have the disparity. We want to have a balance of saying that creative side, both men and women in the workforce. How do we get all of them to say, look, because there's this returning to work and not, but yet be able to say, how do we spread the knowledge to say it's okay not to have to work full time, or it's okay to have the type of position you want today and to be able to have the life that you want to have. It seems that we're not offering that. Do businesses know? And part of the challenge is that we're seeing as we talk to companies, they're using AI tools that are very rigid about what they hire. And that HR departments are not being able to switch over to saying you don't have to hire a certain way. And that's part of the challenge that we're seeing.
I think companies are kind of figuring that out, right? So if you come in and you say, I want a mechatronics person but I want to have 3 years of experience. Well, if somebody has 2 years and 10 months, you're right. AI spits them right out and they get the I'm sorry letter. Well, 2 months, is that really making a difference for you? But I understand businesses want what they want, but when it was humans who could think, you would have some discretion, like, oh, somebody had 2, that's close enough. Let's see what your background is. Let's see where you were working. Let's see the kind of machines you were working on. Right now it's a yes or no. And so that's something I've talked to businesses about when I've been there, is that if you're solely requiring and there's not a human being looking at those letters before those rejection letters go out, you may be missing the opportunity for some really good employees. Other hard talks with businesses is talking about, where did the criteria come for this position originally? So, early on in my career, it was an employer's market, right? And so you would get 200 applications for every, job posting that you put out there, and it was overwhelming. So as a business person and my colleagues, you come up with these criteria, right? So you'd start to say, well, let's give it 5 years of experience, and let's say maybe a master's degree or a college degree, or a 4-year degree, or these were artificial things we made up to try to pick the best of this pool of an overwhelming 200 resumes, right? Now we need to go back and go, it is an employee's market. In South Carolina, we have approximately 90,000 jobs looking for employees. Maybe we need to go reevaluate and ask ourselves, if we had somebody that started here at 19 years old and has worked their way up through the ranks, do they really need a 4-year degree for this position? Or was this something that 20 years ago somebody said we needed? Times have changed. How do we reevaluate what the skill sets are that we need to move people up and give them opportunity? Because as we were talking about earlier, people need to feel vested in the company. They need to feel like they're not going to hit this ceiling and not be able to grow. So as employers, how do we do that? How do we let people feel that if you give us your time and your years of service, we're going to work with you to make sure that you have unlimited potential at this company?
There's another challenge that's occurring. Those workers or individuals who didn't work in a manufacturing facility or didn't work in construction, but are trying to find their way and don't know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. But companies aren't even considering them. Their resumes are getting tossed. They don't know where they want. How do we help that group of individuals who can't find work? And we're seeing it over and over again, and they're saying, I can't find work. We hear that there's this skill set shortage, there's worker shortage, but they're coming back and saying, I can't find work. How do we help that individual who's frustrated and says, I hear about it, but I can't find it? What do we do to help them?
So here in South Carolina, I want anybody hearing this to go to DO, our Department of Workforce, because we have so many programs for finding jobs, for getting people skilled up, for matching them with employment. And I think the problem is, since I've become lieutenant governor, some of the biggest problems people have, or some of the most angry people will come to me and say, I can't, and I'll be like, well, we have a program for that. And they just don't know, right? So what I would say is go to DO, Department of Employment, find out, tell them what your skills are. They'll do a skills match in your area. I mean, we're being so creative that they're taking mobile job fairs out to our rural areas just to meet people where they are. So we know, like, if you're in a rural area, may not have the transportation to get to Columbia or to a bigger city. We're going to take it to you. And I was at their job fair in Union County. I mean, they are there and equipped with people to say, if you're underskilled, this is a program we have for you. We have workforce scholarships that here in South Carolina, the governor and I asking for that in our executive budget, $75 million, to make sure that we can get people that are stuck in those tier 1 jobs skilled up to where they need to be. So there's 5 genres, right? Like it's education, it's transportation, it's nursing, it's our skilled trades, it's welding. If you will go into one of these, we will pay for this education for you through our technical colleges. DO has a lot of programs on their own that you can do that will get you certified in certain positions. There is really no excuse. It might take a little work. You got to get up and you got to find them. You got to get yourself and make an appointment with DO, but we have resources for you.
So the idea is that we talked about last time, you got to get up off the couch.
That's right.
You got to go want to do it. So when we look at this, if they can't afford, like even those folks that can't afford to retire,
yeah,
and they're living longer, Is there opportunities? They've been let go from their companies. Is there opportunities for them as well? I mean, because we're seeing that some of the older population is being let go, but they say, look, I can't afford to retire. What about those individuals that we talk about?
You know, we have such a shortage. Let's talk about, we'll pick something that's very labor intensive, like construction, like HVAC, electrical, plumbing, things where you're digging under houses, you're climbing in attics, right? Maybe you hit a point where you can't afford not to work, but your body is just not allowing you to do this. Do you know our colleges and technical colleges are craving for people with workforce knowledge to come in and help train the next generation? So it's not saying this is what I'm doing today and how do I do it somewhere else. It's like, how do I take what I've learned maybe in the last 30 or 40 years and reinvent myself in something that I can now physically do, right? We have a nursing shortage. Well, nurses are in such short supply that it's hard to get people in nursing to come out and start teaching nursing. So it's this vicious circle, right? So I would love for people to think that they could take what's important to them and where their skills have led them and look to something else. Our boat builders, it is a trade, it's a craft. So maybe people that were doing building, right? Our boat builders could hire 250 people. That's how short-staffed they are. And I said, well, what do you need? They said, if they'll show up, pass a drug test, if they can work a drill and read a tape measure, we'll train them the rest. Well, who is that ideal for, right? People coming out of construction. Now you're not climbing buildings. You might be climbing a ladder, but you're still doing that craft kind of work. And I think reaching out to people at employment workforce organizations, they're there to help you, right? They're not, if you go in and say, this is what I've done, I still need to work, I really can't do this anymore, they will take all those skills and figure out where they can move you around. So utilize these great state resources that we have here for you.
So the opportunity's there. It's just if they want the job, they have to do the work.
Exactly.
It's there.
Nobody's going to come. Hey, nobody's ever come knocking on any of our doors and begged us to come and work, right? So you have to have initiative, and that it's really 90% of the game.
Well, that's what we have to do. Pamela Evette, Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina, I love having conversations with you. We've got one more to spend some time together, but thank you for joining me today.
Peggy, thank you.
Where do you want our listeners and viewers to go to get more information, as you mentioned today?
So I want you to go out to do our Department of Workforce and Training. If they're looking for a job, if they feel like they want to skill up, they can help put you into any one of our upskilling programs that are out there. I want them to reach out, and I want them to follow me on social media because I talk about these great programs all the time. I'm super positive. We have way too much in our great state to be positive about. That being negative, it just doesn't fit in my wheelhouse.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, listeners, that is all the time we have for this segment. Make sure to subscribe to our episodes each week. Follow us on X at Connected World and on LinkedIn to continue this conversation. Check out our website at connectedworld.com or the show website at thepeggysmedleyshow.com. All right, this is the Peggy Smedley Show, your voice for our connected world. And remember, with great technology comes great responsibility. We'll be right back.